without further ado, let's introduce our panel. First of all, Jamie Willoughby, our director's here. We've got Simon Gage, our co-chairman, Jimmy McNulty, our head coach, Andy Duff, Director of Commercial Operations, our COO, Chief Operating Officer George Dells, Ryan Bradley, our AFC and the Community Trust Director, Richard Knight, Director, and last but certainly not least, our voice on the board from the Dale Supporters Trust, Mr. Murray Knight. Let's have just a quick round of applause, go on. Right, we'll do it anyway, right. So without further ado, we're going to hear off our co-chairman this evening, Simon Gage. Over to you, Simon.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks again, very big thank you to everyone for coming along. I just wanted to offer a couple of apologies to a couple of people that aren't here this evening. Firstly, our owner and co-chairman, Cameron Ogden, sends his apologies. He's currently started a trek up Mount Kilimanjaro for charity at the moment, so fairly good excuse not to be here, but that's where he is. And Tony Pockney also sends his apologies this evening. His son's moving house today, so I think he's on heavy lifting duty, and that's where he is. So that's all the formalities done, so I'll pass you on to Dave now and start taking questions for Jim.
Right, thank you very much, Simon. So our head coach, you've seen him make his entrance this evening. Just a reminder, you know obviously where the club is at the moment. 22 league fixtures to play, 66 points to play for, very handily placed in the National League, making great strides in the FA Trophy as well. I think we're about 4 or 5 games from progressing to the final, and also handily placed in the National League Cup as well. So the club, the footballing side, is progressing rather nicely, but you got your chance tonight to ask your questions to our head coach, Jim McNulty. So if you have a question for Jim, just put your hand in the air. We'll start. Just raise your hand if you have a question for Jim. Someone surely must have a question for Jim. If not, he's going to get a flat. We'll start over here. If you could just introduce yourself, please, and ask your question to Jimmy.
Hi, Jim, it's Matt. How are the issues with the pitch impacted the squad, and has it been a problem with going forward trying to recruit players as well?
Hi, Matt. I'll answer the second part of your question first. I think that was the one that was most pertinent to me at the end there. In terms of recruiting players, because of the problems we're having with our pitch, I must admit I've not experienced anything in that regard. But to answer the first part of your question, what problems is the pitch causing the team? I think some significant ones. We'll have to sit here and collectively admit that. I think otherwise, we wouldn't be acting accordingly, because I think many of the problems that the pitch is currently causing us probably lie ahead, unfortunately. They probably don't lie in this moment now, because the eventualities of those games we should have played haven't passed yet. They all lie ahead of us. But what I would say is that congesting those fixtures further down the schedule and bottlenecking them at a period whereby things will be pretty hectic, pretty heavy on the players' bodies, and also much more to play for. The actual effects, who knows? I don't know. But ultimately, I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't harming more than it was helping.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Can I ask anyone who's got a question this side of the room? I'll come to this gentleman here. If you can just introduce yourself to our head coach and fire your question away. Thank you.
Hiya, Tony Kaminskas. Traditionally, for as long as I can remember, and it's a long time since I've been coming here, we've always tended to attack the Sandy Lane in the second half, but now you've changed it around. I'm just wondering what the rationale and thinking is behind that.
No problem, Tony. Yeah, good question. Thanks for that. So I've actually had this conversation with a number of fans sporadically on different days and different times, and whenever I've bumped into people, faces that I know and faces that I don't. The answer has been pretty simple for me in my mind throughout. I've literally searched all avenues for what I feel may give us any and every upper hand in a game. Now, we feel, or you guys feel certainly, and I feel in my time as a player, that attacking certain ends at certain times give us opportunity to score more so than maybe going another way in a stadium, whether that's just through the level of support at one ground to another end. We feel, you know, our beloved Cromwell Arena, that attacking the Sandy Lane end sucks the ball into the net in that second half, when we hopefully bombard a team and steamroll our way to victory no matter what happened in the first half. But statistically, it's proven over football globally that the team that goes ahead in a game is the most likely to win that game, and is the team that's most likely to take the most points from that game. So being pretty surgical about it, and maybe not as romantic, looking at that initially and thinking, what's our best opportunity to get ahead in this game? Well, maybe it's attacking the Sandy Lane end from the off. I know that over the last X amount of years, I won't necessarily name them, we've had a pretty horrific record at home, and it was something we needed to address, of course, and we're looking for anything and everything to help that. So that was one of the reasons. The other one, I'll be totally honest with you, I think the standard of refereeing in the National League system is not quite up to scratch what it is in the Football League, let's say, and we've also had our complaints in the Football League, but I never felt overly comfortable allowing, this is more, not necessarily the end we attack, but the end we situate the dugouts. I was also not comfortable with opposition management teams directly manipulating the dugout on that side, which was another change we decided to make in our home games, just because, you know, if anyone's going to be trying to gain an advantage in a game by softly speaking into a linesman's ear, so to speak, I'd rather it be us, not them. But yeah, those are some of the reasons, amongst others, that we made the change that you spoke about there, as well as others.
Thank you, Jimmy. Well answered, and a great question from Tony. Who else has a question for our head coach? Put your hand up if you have a question. You're in for an easy ride tonight, Jim. Surely no one got a question, because we will move the evening on. This is your last chance. Put your hand up if you've got a question to ask Jimmy McNulty, our head coach. This chap has a question, thank you.
Hi, my name's Ian. I believe we've lost a striker today who's gone back on loan. Does that mean we'll be getting another 1/2 in?
Yeah, good question. We have indeed, yeah, Matt Dennis has returned to MK Dons, his parent club. It's certainly an area that we are looking to support the squad with. Just mindful, of course, that Cairo Mitchell in the main as the 9 carries the burden of that role somewhat alone. He's supported by Devante Rodney and Ian Henderson and the other guys who play just behind Cairo in the main, but they're slightly different types of players. We do feel as a technical staff that is an area we should look to continually support. If you compare that singular position to maybe some of the other teams targeting the positions that we may feel we are, then they try to remain strong in that position. So I think we had another prior to Matt Dennis in Joe Wesley, who came from Burnley, who wasn't able to feature as much because unfortunately he got concussed in one of his first appearances, and then also found it hard to get into our team because Cairo Mitchell was in red hot form and scored 9 goals in 9 games, and ultimately was named Player of the Month for the whole National League division that month. You can't necessarily keep a loanee happy when he's not getting any minutes, so Joe returned on that front, and then we went into the market again for Matt Dennis to supplement the squad and bolster the squad's opportunities to be successful in that position. But yes, it is an area that we are continuing to monitor the market to see if we can, you know, make our squad even stronger.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Ian, for the question. This chap here has a question for our head coach. If you could just introduce yourself to Jimmy, please.
Hi, it's Steve. I think it's fair to say that Saturday's home performance was the best I've seen for maybe 3 or 4 years. and it was noticeable that a couple of the goals came from what we might describe as direct passes from the back through to the forwards. Are you anticipating that that is going to be a style that we will adopt from now on for the rest of the season, since it was pretty successful on Saturday? You might argue that that's what you've been looking to do anyway, but is it something that could perhaps be emphasised more within the squad to the players?
Good question. I agree that Saturday's performance was an excellent one. I think recent performances have also been at a very good level. Even the loss away at Forest Green, I thought was a very similar performance, and the two league performances before that I think were filed away in Tamworth at home, which were both similar performances in terms of how much we affected the opponent's goal. Ultimately, we always look for variance in how we attack, and it is dictated by us, it is dictated by what we try to do, but sometimes also, and quite obviously, it is dictated by what the opponent tries to do against us. So if any teams give us space, which doesn't seem to be many, beyond them, then we look to take it all the time. We look to have variance in the speed of our attacks and the length of our attacks, whether it be short and long. What we have found this season is that through the growth in our performances, through the growth in our squad, many teams have come to the Crown Oil now and have almost give up our half of the pitch in terms of giving the ball back, and they condense themselves into their own half. I think if we are to continue to go direct against teams that are going to be compact and low, with guys that are probably in the main bigger, stronger profiles than our players are, then we're going to have to change our profiles of our squad. But I think that's normal. I think that's a consequence of our growth as a team. It's a consequence of the respect that teams are giving us now. I think it's something that it's live feedback from the league. The way teams treat us, we have to find a different way. But some teams still take us on. Yeovil did. It was to their detriment on the day. But I agree, it was a very good performance. I did see somewhere that it was the highest XG posted this season by any team in the National League in any game, which is a very good sign. And of course we want to replicate those performances where we can damage the opposition as many ways as possible, as many times as possible.
Thank you, Steve. I think it was for that wonderful question. Anyone else got a question for our head coach? And just hand the microphone to this chap here. Just introduce yourself to Jimmy, please.
Alright, it's Tom. How's Ethan Ebanks-Landell's recovery coming along? And how have we adapted as a squad to Liam Hogan playing that central role more, given that he's had a long career, maybe not so much as a creative centre-half?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, with regards to the skipper, Ethan, I did update on this in one of my post matches. Whether you heard that or not, I'm not too sure. But Ethan, unfortunately, had a relapse of his injury, kind of in the medium stages of his recovery, not necessarily the final stages. He wasn't close to training, but he was on the grass, he was out working, he was running, but he was feeling something that wasn't quite right. Him being the way he is, he was not necessarily wanting to report it to the extent that he was feeling it, because he's a warrior, to be honest. I know that from playing alongside him and now watching him every day in the training ground and playing for our team in front of us. I think maybe being a warrior in this instance wasn't the most helpful thing for his rehab. I think he potentially, without really revealing too much, maybe didn't take it back to square one himself from not revealing, but we were unsure on some of the things he was feeling as he was returning, and unfortunately when it was re-scanned, when Ethan was in too much trouble and was too far behind where we think he should be, we had it re-scanned and Ethan had relapsed pretty much to the same stage that he started, and it was a very significant injury to start with. So unfortunately, that the initial injury and the relapse of that injury mean that the skipper misses most, if not all, of the season. But him being him, he's trying his utmost to give everything he can to try and return for some part of the season. And if we do see him, it'll be the most fired up version of him he's ever been, I think. So that's where Ethan's up to. With regards to Liam Hogan, first and foremost, I think he's done an excellent job since coming into the team. Ethan is a huge loss in many aspects. Not only the ones that you see quite obviously in terms of dealing with things into our box. It's the leadership element, it's the understanding element, it's the bravery to call out teammates and constantly make sure that a standard is challenged or a standard is met and strived for each day, because like anyone else, the team at times have their down days on training grounds, like we all do in our workplace, whatever day. When we're not feeling it, Ethan challenges them people all the time. So that's the big loss for Ethan Ebanks-Langdale. Liam's come into the team, into the squad, into the club. Obviously more trying to just prove his own credentials to the rest of his team rather than lead instantly like Ethan has. But I think he's done an excellent job in terms of adapting to the way we play, utilising his skills to help our team. I think Gator away notable on that front. I think on the night I remember the amount of attacks that he repelled individually. I think despite what you may have said there about Liam not necessarily being the most creative centre-back throughout his career, I think he's adapted to the way we're playing very well. And I think we've been able to utilise his skills well. I think in terms of anyone just stepping in the nature that Ethan got injured, maybe we couldn't have found too many better in that moment, how challenged we were in the emergency nature of that. I think Liam's done great, and hopefully he continues to do so.
Thanks Jimmy, and thanks Tom for the question. Any other questions for our head coach before we move on with this evening's proceedings? I think that kind of looks like it concludes it from Jimmy. So ladies and gentlemen, show of appreciation to our head coach, Jimmy McNulty. At this juncture, we are due to take a break. I'm just looking for a heads up from the co-chairman. Do you want to take the break now, or do you want to move on? We're going to continue. Right, okay. The next section, you're going to hear off four of the panel this evening. We're not inviting questions just yet. They're just going to say one or two words, and then in the second half, we'll hear from the questions, and you'll get your opportunity. So first up, going to speak to us this evening at the Fans Forum is our co-chairman, Mr. Simon Gage.
Okay, I just want to explain, I've drawn the short straw a little bit to explain a little bit about the pitch issues this evening, and what we've been experiencing this year and what we'll continue to experience for the rest of the season. After the Oldham game, the pitch became fairly saturated with water, and it became fairly clear on certain parts of the playing surface. The water just wasn't passing through, it was just sitting on the top, and even after 2 or 3 days of dryish weather as you get in Rochdale, the water just wasn't going anywhere and sitting there. Particularly in the centre circle at that point, which is the biggest issue. And actually that centre circle then started disintegrating, particularly after those of you here for the Manchester United under-21 game. After that game, the stability in the surface went, and it turned into a mud bath. And actually, even after 2 or 3 days, when you went out to inspect that centre part of the pitch, the smell of stagnant water was quite overbearing. We tried our best with sponges and things like that to get it dry and getting close to matches, but the New Year's Day match came to a head a little bit when that was called off, and the local referee that came along had a good chat to him, and he basically highlighted the issue of that centre circle then, saying the stability had totally gone and be very unlikely to get a referee to care with any sort of further rain, or even when it's dry, the pitch could be considered dangerous in that part. So action needed taken at that point for the centre part of the pitch. The rest of the pitch, funnily enough, at that point was behaving fairly well. There's constantly a problem in the bottom corner between the main stand and Pearl Street, with it draining down there, but it was coping all right at that point, and those matches were all called off purely because of the centre circle. So those at the match last Saturday will see that we've had specialists in to give us advice, and the only thing there was to take the whole pitch out, and that's right the way down to the root zone, which is where the stitching bit goes into. So all the stitching on the pitch, all the turf and all the ground down to about 30 millimetres all got taken out, and that material was being able to be examined very closely then, because it had all been dug out, and water just wasn't passing through that. So even if the drainage underneath was great, the water just wasn't getting through it to get to the drainage. However, on the inspection then of the ground underneath, that isn't fantastic either, and the water doesn't pass through that. So what was then decided to do on that particular section of the pitch was dig channels out to mirror where the drains are and fill them with gravel to allow the water to escape somewhere. And then the pitch was rebuilt after that, so the turf gone on, and the pitch was re-stitched at twice the density that it was done when it was originally done back in 2020. So that sorted that part of the pitch out. Unfortunately, since then, with the rain and things that have happened after that, the problem's kind of shifted to other areas of the pitch, namely 3 of the 4 corners. And with various consultants coming in, there's limited options of what we've got to be able to do that. We're not going to be able to get the drainage sorted out in such big areas, and we're kind of stuck with what we've got to a certain degree. So the plan of where we are now on a bigger picture side of things is there's 2 projects. There's one, how do we get through this season, and we've been blessed hopefully with 5 or 6 days of dry weather now. Pitch has dried up quite a fair bit today with the sunshine on it, certainly in 2 of the 3 corners that are the problem. We've got a machine coming in tomorrow called an Air 2 G2 machine that basically penetrates the upper surface and causes, similar to like a little mini earthquake underneath the surface, which will hopefully break the root zone up a little bit to allow the water to pass through it. And after the Oldham game next week, there's also some very deep vertidraining going in between 9 and 13 inches. And when the 13-inch ones go in, the holes that it leaves are then filled with sand, again to try and enable water to pass through away from the surface, basically, so we can get games on. They're just very temporary solutions then. They work for a period of time, but they're not a long-term solution to the pitch issues that we have. The other thing that we're doing is, these actions will hopefully get the pitch dry, is then to try and keep the pitch dry from that point forward, and we've got some full rain covers arriving on Monday that cover the full pitch, so we can hopefully be in a position to stop water going onto the pitch. So if we get any more storms or any significant rainfall, we can get the pitch covered, which keeps it dry, which hopefully avoids us hitting the problem where water gets onto the pitch and then we can't get rid of it, which is basically what's happening. That's been happening up until this point. So that's where we are on the pitch. I know there were problems on Tuesday. We kind of put out a statement yesterday trying to explain the processes that go through on Tuesday. We apologise that it was a late calling off. The referee made that decision. There was a post went out early in the day that in hindsight, we wish it wouldn't have gone out, but that was in specific relation to a BBC article that said the game had already been postponed. And while the weather was dry throughout the day, there was a fair amount of optimism that the match would go in on Tuesday night. But the referee unfortunately deemed the pitch in that particular corner to be unplayable, so called it off at around about 6 o'clock. When we've all just had a little speak, and after the break we'll answer specific questions on the pitch if there's anything else that we haven't covered there in the statement yesterday.
Thank you very much, Simon. A thorough and a detailed explanation on what's happened on the pitch, and as I'm sure, I think the mic's going to be passed over to George next. Have you got anything else, Simon, do you like to cover? No, George. Right, next up is our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. George Delves.
Evening everybody, be a little bit quicker than that from me. It was just a very brief update that the Board of Directors and the ownership group have asked me to give on behalf of some of the non-first team football activity at the club, I suppose. We've sat in these meetings for a little while now in relation to particularly the academy situation that the club finds itself in. So the situation remains unchanged, that unless we're promoted out of the National League at the end of this season, unfortunately we won't be permitted to run an academy under the Elite Player Performance Plan beyond the end of this season. It's a real shame. We've not been able to recruit any first year scholars this year. We've had again some contributions already from the second year scholars. Jim can perhaps speak a little bit more to that than me, but certainly the likes of Corey Edwards, Isaac Burgess and latterly both Oscar Kelly, Ben Horn, Joe Akpan have all been on the bench. Many have supplemented training for you, Jim, as well on a week by week, day to day basis, and some will remain with us next season. But unfortunately, like I said, unless we progress back to the EFL upon the conclusion of this season, that pipeline is going to start drying up a little bit. So we've had to start having a look at what comes next. There'll still be a youth development programme within the football club. The ownership group are extremely passionate that talented footballers within Rochdale and Greater Manchester as a whole have got the opportunity to progress through a system and ultimately aim to represent Rochdale Football Club or go on to have a career in league football or non-league football elsewhere. What we would traditionally have called the academy team or under 18s or under 19s will pivot next season, so there won't be in the EFL division unless we go back up, obviously. So the National League Youth Academy division will be where they play. There's some good teams in that still. Oldham, being a year further on in their journey, have entered that division this season, and other teams who've got good reputations locally in terms of youth development, Chester, York, etc., all have teams in that division. It's the next best option of where we can get to. So we'll be looking to recruit a total of, in conjunction with the sports college that's currently run by the Community Trust, a total of around 50 players for next season. There'll be lots of news going out in the next few weeks about how people can apply, what trial process there will be. We're hopeful that we will be able to kind of mop up a good amount of players that are released from the professional game by clubs local to ourselves at under 16 level, who will join us essentially as college students at under 17 and represent us in that National League Youth Alliance, with the aim of eventually progressing through the pyramid and hopefully affecting Jim's first team in years to come. Ryan next season will continue to run under the banner of the Community Trust development centres for the boys section. So that will run from, it's 9s to 15s, Ryan, isn't it, initially, with an under 16s programme kind of at various stages throughout the season. And the other area that we don't touch on too much in fans forums, but again the ownership group and the board of directors as a whole are extremely passionate about and want to develop further, is female strand. Our women's first team so far this season, again, unfortunately lots of things linked back into the pitch, but they haven't had the opportunity to play at the Crown Oil Arena yet this season. We are hopeful that we'll be able to get games in prior to the end of the season once the pitch works that Simon has alluded to take place and the weather gets a little bit better. We had two really good games here last season. The first was in the Women's FA Cup. I'm looking around the room. I know a number of you were here for that game, Jim. You and your family came to the game, and it was a good day, and it was one of the first games that group had ever played together. So over the coming years, you can expect a little bit more effort and a little bit more resource and a little bit more profile to be given to that team, because it's really important to us that we develop that group. Similarly, we've got a really successful grassroots girls program within the town that some of you will be aware of and some of you won't. It has well over 3 figures in terms of girls of various ages playing for it. Whilst it's kind of a self-governed entity under the banner of the Community Trust, we're going to be kind of inching that closer towards the club and making sure that it's got all of the support that it needs to grow further and ensure that any girl within the borough has got the opportunity to play for Rochdale Football Club. So that's where we are with that. And again, the difficulty that we face is all of this is always in flux. So we will present some further information in the public arena on this, but the long-term aspiration, obviously, as we've put in writing, is to get back into the EFL at the earliest opportunity, and we'll end up, hopefully, with 2 concurrent programmes running, because as soon as we get back into the EFL, we'll restart our boys' academy, and the aspiration on the female pathway is to secure some external investment and get, in the medium term, what's called an ETC licence, an Elite Talent Centre, which is essentially at school age, so 9 to 16s, the equivalent at our level to what kind of an elite boys academy would be. So there's lots of development going on from a football point of view beyond the first team, but ultimately we want to be able to service, well, we've got two aims obviously from a youth development point of view. We want to be able to service both the men's first team for Jimmy and the women's first team for Lee. But more broadly, a real stated objective of the ownership group is that, in conjunction with the Community Trust, anyone within Rochdale who wants to wear the badge, whether they be a child, boy, girl, whether they have disabilities, whether they're a military veteran, whether they participate in walking football, any single person within the borough should have the opportunity to be able to find a team and to wear the Rochdale badge. So certainly there's teams at this level who've done that better than us in the past. We certainly want elite strands everywhere, but we want participation strands as well, and we think it's a really important way of helping to grow the fan base as well. So yeah, that was everything from myself. Happy to take any questions when we move on to that in a short while about kind of the non-first team football side of things, but I'll hand over to Andy. I think you're next after me.
Yeah, it's just thank you very much, George. We're going to hear now off Andy Duff, who is our Director of Commercial Operations here at the Crown Hall Arena.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I'm just going to quickly update you pretty on 4 different areas that are going on in commercial at this point in time. The first one is our ticketing operation. We are currently conducting a pretty full review on 4 key areas to do with ticketing. And I hear some of the feedback, and I very much see it on a match day outside the ticket office. The basic fan experience of buying a ticket at the minute isn't perfect. So some of the apps and some of the kind of the registration process around that could be improved. At the same time, from an internal point of view, the ease of use for the staff and the guys when they set up a game and they kind of administer all of that, it is challenging with the existing ticketing operation. How that links to what we call access control, fundamentally the turnstiles, is important to make sure that those 2 systems talk to each other. And finally, the administration around reporting, both financial reporting, so the revenue side, but also then, a great example, the Manchester United under-21 game, we had 4,500 fans here. How do we communicate with fans? How do we know those fans and say, thanks for coming, do you want to buy a further ticket? That isn't really optimal as well. So we're currently going through that. Obviously, we're in a commercial relationship with our existing ticketing partner. We're seeing how they can improve what they've got, but we've also done a full review across the whole market and to see, are there better solutions out there. We're in a relationship with our existing partner until the end of this season, so we'll be making a decision and communicating that in the weeks ahead on what were our ticketing plans for next year. So that was kind of the first kind of commercial update. The second would be around kits for next year. Firstly, I want to say thanks. We got some a broad range, so lots of feedback, and also some really high quality feedback on ideas, as well as a large number of specific designs, saying this is the stuff we love and this is the stuff we kind of didn't like so much, etc. Myself and George met with O'Neill's just this week actually, so having had a first set of designs for O'Neill's, we took on all that feedback and fed them a much tighter brief for a second phase. By the mid to end of Feb, we'll get that second set of designs for O'Neill's, which I think will be closer to what is in our head, but also a closer representation of the feedback we got from you as fans on how this kit's could look. So we're in that process, and as we get into February, there are meetings scheduled to share those kits in February and March before we kind of place in order the back end of the year. And we've talked around looking to have launches of July, August, September type of plan. So we're ahead of the game in ordering than we were. I remember when I joined July, August in 2024. The third piece was, it's great to sit here. We have a new member of our senior leadership team joining us on Monday. You may have seen an advert for a head of operations role. Chris Garland starts on Monday with us, and he'll take on some of the responsibility operationally for me day to day, some of George's responsibility day to day, looking after the stadium, all the facilities we have, getting a match on, and also then as we become a multi-site operation, things like a training ground, will take on that broader responsibility. Bit of a football CV. Chris is currently at Hull City, so he's left from Hull City, previously been at Dundee United. He had 4 years at Tranmere, 2019 to 2023, and before that he was at Everton. So he's had a number of clubs he's worked at in stadium manager roles, facilities and operations. So he joins with us on Monday, and it'll be great to have him, and you'll no doubt see him. He was actually at the game on Tuesday for a couple of hours as well. And the final thing just to touch on, you might have heard a phrase, Project 5000, and it's a phrase that I know has been kind of we've used, and it is our ambition, and I understand it is an ambitious goal to try and regularly get 5,000 fans to the Crown Hall Arena. It touches every aspect of the football club, the community trust, who have such a massive group of participants. It touches the first point I made today, ticketing, how people buy a ticket and the experience that they have. It touches Jimmy and what they come and see on the pitch. It very much touches the match day experience. If you come here for the first time, is it a good experience? Would you pay and come back again? It touches our kind of non-match day facilities. So we had a funeral today up in 1907. Do people come here and see this as a place they come to regularly? So as we start to develop and lead plans, especially for next season, on what does that look like, what's our strategy, how we're going to attract more fans to come here more regularly, more news will come along. But I just wanted to talk and explain that concept, which is pretty clear, but some of the ambitions we're trying to get more than 5,000 fans regularly at the Crown Hall Arena for every home game.
Thank you much, Andy Duff, our Head of Commercial Operations. We're going to take a little break. We're going to resume in about 5, possibly 10 minutes time. When you can come back, we'll hear off Jamie Willoughby. He's got a few words to say. We'll also read out some questions that have been submitted by not just the Dale Supporters Trust members, but some fans who can't get here for a varying amount of reasons, and then we'll open up the floor as well to you guys to ask your questions to the panel. So we'd ask you to go and get a drink, have a comfort break, whatever, and we'll resume in no more than 10 minutes time. Thank you. Right, we're going to resume this evening. We're going to hear off Jamie Willoughby, and then we've got some questions that have been submitted to the club, not just from Dale Supporters Trust members who are not here, but for fans who can't get here. So we'll address those questions with the panel, and then we'll give you an opportunity on the floor to ask your question to any member of the panel this evening. But without further ado, we're going to hear off one of the directors this evening. We're delighted to have Jamie Willoughby here. Jamie, over to you. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming this evening. I do actually have some slides to go through, but don't worry, I'm going to rattle through them. I won't keep you too long. I'm conscious, when I was here about 6 months ago, I talked about how, as a representative of the Ogden family here tonight, that we were keen to make sure that one of the things we looked at was implementing the fan-led review suggestions on the fan engagement side of things, and nothing's happened on that front until tonight. And so I'm pleased to be able to talk tonight about an initiative we're about to launch, which is all about that. And we're calling it the Rochdale AFC Club Advisory Board. Now, we're not reinventing the wheel. This is the other clubs have these, But it's something we'd really like to, and are going to now bring in to play at Rochdale. Essentially a forum where club representatives can engage with fans, and ultimately what we're trying to do, we're trying to improve communication between the fans and the club, and engagement, and those two things are different. We're conscious as having acquired a large shareholding in the club, there's always a risk that people are going to start to feel slightly alienated, slightly less involved, slightly able to have their say, and it was unavoidable taking the shares in the first place, but that's the last thing the Ogdens want to happen at the club. This is one way of trying to demonstrate that's the case. So I'll just talk you through how it's going to work. Essentially, it's going to be a board, a forum, whatever you want to call it, that will meet. There'll be club representatives. So from the club, there'll always be board representatives, executive management, so Andy and George, our disability liaison officer, Nicola, will be there, and Ryan from the Community Trust will be there. So essentially, almost everyone you would want to talk to at the club if you had an issue or concern or wanted to raise, or you should be able to get all the answers you need. So who's going to be on the board from the fan representative side? It might be slightly wider than fans, by the way. I'm fans for the presentation. It might be stakeholders more generally. We might get a corporate sponsor in there. We might want to have, we're going to be flexible, but ultimately it's going to be mostly fans. So essentially, the way we envisage it, there will be Dale Trust representatives on there automatically. But in addition, we'd like to make sure that we get as wider representative group of the existing fan base, but also representatives from those areas of the fan base that we might really want to engage more going forward in the coming years. So we'd like season tickets, ideally one from each stand, a non-season ticket holder, because it's a different experience. You have different issues, concerns. Corporate hospitality patrons, and then talking about those other demographics where I think no disrespect, but even looking around the room, we could do better, and we'd need to do better as we want to grow the fan base at tapping into more. So we want youth involvement, female involvement, families, and there are other groups, disabled supporters and others who we will need to engage more. So that's what we would like it to look like. Now, I think there are three areas that I really think this board should be set up to help with. The first one is communication. I know that we know that communication in any organisation, but here has not always been the best, and can always be better. And it's your club. You are entitled to know what's going on and be informed about everything that's going on at the club. So communication is one thing that my personal mission is to make that part of what the club does the best it can be. You may have noticed in recent comms that have gone out, which some people are probably think are far too long and wordy. I'd rather be accused of giving more information than not enough. So culturally through the club, we're trying to implement an improvement in the comms that come out, and hopefully what the advisory board will do is make that a two-way process. So the representatives, the fan representatives on the board, will be able to bring issues, bring questions, positive or negative, and that feedback will go back from the club in a constructive and productive way. Engagement. So there's engagement, what I would call day-to-day, annual, repetitive engagement. There's going to be calendar events which are there every year in their football schedule. There's going to be new kits coming out. There's going to be ticket pricing to be discussed. There's going to be a whole load of stuff which we need to engage. We need fan feedback. We need fan involvement. And this is the forum where that, in addition to everything else that goes on, this is a supplemental way that we will make sure that happens. And then, obviously, we've talked as I don't like saying ownership group. We talked about as the Ogdens as some pretty big projects that we'd like to push through over the years. You know, maybe some development of the stand. We'd like to get the training facilities back in the borough. We want the first team training in the borough, and community hubs and what have you. None of that is going to happen. None of that will happen sensibly if we don't make sure that we've got a really wide variety of fan engagement and fan input into that process. So all of those big strategic projects will be a key part of the agenda of the advisory board. And then finally, growth. I nearly put Project 5000 on the slide, but I know everyone, you know, that is our ambition. It's very ambitious, but you've got to shoot high. Project 5000 really that feeds into growth. It's not just an opportunity for people to come in and sit at a table with the club and give their opinions. What we really want is it to be a two-way process. We're not going to get 5,000 people in the gate. If we don't attract a different type of demographic to the ground, right? We need more families, we need more kids, we need the youth, we need more women. We need all of the demographics I was describing to come, and we're not going to get those in if we don't engage those people and get them to get that word out. So become ambassadors for the club and spread the word. So Project 5000, how can you help us achieve that collectively is the third limb of what we will look to do. I'm conscious I'm talking too much, but I'll just... So very high level, the idea is that it would meet every couple of months. It would meet more often if needed. So if for example, Andy's got, you know, we're getting to season ticket pricing stage and we want to have a specific meeting to deal with something like that, or whatever the issue may be. It may be that, for example, we're having a nightmare with the pitch. Right, well, why don't we have an advisory board meeting, get everyone in, give them the kind of feedback we gave in our comms yesterday, but give them it in advance and currently, so that we can at least get the word out wider and engage as we go along. So we can have ad hoc meetings when we need to. All meetings minuted, all minutes published on the club website, so everyone else who's not involved directly in the board can see what's being said, can hear the feedback, and then, typical agenda. So as I said, fan feedback and questions, that's the communication part of it. Then we'll deal with the specific projects and initiatives that are underway at that point. And then Project 5000 growth. So that's broad brush what we want to put in place. I hope it will be welcomed. It's only going to work. It's only going to be successful. It will be as successful as keen as the people are on it. It will only work if the people who are on the board really want to be there, are really enthusiastic, hold the club to account, but also be really constructive and positive in achieving what should be a combined goal of everyone, which is, you know, to make this club the best it can be. I'll finish now, but obviously, important point. If you fit into any of those demographics, groups, categories, and if you feel that you want to be on that board, or you know someone who you think would be perfect for it, then the Dale Trust will work out. The Dale Trust will be responsible for making their representatives, and they will have their own process for doing that. But for all of the other ones, we're going to invite everyone to email the club nominating themselves or someone else, or essentially asking to be on the board, and we will then choose a selection who we think are representative and offer the best chance of it being a really productive board. Details as to how that will work are going to be coming out in the next couple of days, so we'll publish it all, and really hope that people engage, because that's what it's for. Anyway, that's me done.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Wonderful words. Right, we're going to press on. Just now conscious of the time. Before we open the floor to questions from the panel this evening, I have a list of questions that have been submitted, not just members of the Dale Supporters Trust, but fans who took the opportunity to email the club in with their questions. If you're watching this tomorrow or further dates on YouTube, if your name was submitted, I will read your name out. Some of the questions are anonymous. The first question is, why could this event not be live streamed? There are a good number of exiles and people with caring responsibilities who would have liked to have participated virtually. It's happened before, and the Trust has streamed live already this season, so it seems a real omission not to offer this facility tonight. Who would like to field that question? George Delves.
Many thanks for the question. Always a difficult one. I'm looking around the room today. We've got a fair attendance. I think reflecting back on other fans forums that I've been involved in, we really first and foremost want people in the room. I would say, looking around the room, we're probably down a little bit compared to previous numbers. I think sometimes that's a reflection of the fact that we're not at a crisis point as we have been in at various stages over the past few years. Things are going okay on the field from a football point of view, and things are a little bit more stable off the field, obviously with a change of ownership. So we want to continue to drive attendance in the room. We've had like quite significant technical issues when we've been trying to stream things this season. So I take the point of the individual who asked the question about the Dale Trust streaming events. Certainly the last one that we did, so the kit event, the feedback to Andy and I were the fact that whilst they could hear us, they couldn't hear anything else within the room. So unfortunately, that one didn't go brilliantly, and we've certainly had issues when we've been trying to do fans forums in here, where the tech or Wi-Fi or anything else from that point of view has let us down. So we just felt on this occasion, for two reasons, to drive physical attendance in the room, but also to give people the best experience who aren't in the room. It'd be a better option to record and release it in 24 hours time. So hopefully everyone will still get access to all of the information. People have still had the opportunity to ask questions, but that's the decision we took on this occasion.
Right, thank you, George. Next question, although it says anonymous, I suggest this is from a member of the Exiles. Commentary on Dale player this season has been beset by technical problems, resulting in lost reception as on Saturday's game versus Yeovil, and excess noise from surrounding areas, meaning that the match commentary is drowned out, similar to what happened when we played Forest Green away. Now, a regular complaint from Exiles is that the sound is distorted. What plans are in place to reduce these problems? Who'd like to field that question?
I think it probably relates back to the previous answer a little bit as well, in that there's been quite a bit of investment in trying to get the Wi-Fi up and at speed, and we've got new lines put into here, but there's still, probably because of the age of some of the wiring things around the ground, issues that occur that are very difficult to get to the bottom of. So technically that's one of the issues that we always face, but those specific ones raised in that question we'll pass on to the media team to have a look at and see if they can be addressed.
Thank you, Simon. Do you want to add to that, George?
Yeah, I won't speak on behalf of everybody from a media point of view, but I think there's been some progress made on that, and we're expecting an improvement, I think, over the next couple of games. So hopefully that should have rectified itself now. We can't always control what the standard's like for an away fixture, but certainly for home fixtures, we'd expect a bit of an improvement for the upcoming games.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you, Simon. The next question has been submitted by Neil Watts. Neil asks, when the pitch was reconstructed in 2020 by Jay Mallison, a 10-year warranty was included in the contracts, which required the club to undertake regular annual maintenance by approved contractors. The maintenance work was undertaken by Mallisons at the end of the 2021 season, approved by the then Chief Executive and the board, and who had been responsible for installing the new pitch. A new board under the current co-chairman then took over, and has regular maintenance been approved by contractors? Has it taken place under the tenure of the board? And if it has, why hasn't the warranty been invoked to require Mallisons to repair the pitch? Quite a lengthy question there from Neil Watts. Who would like to... Is that one for you, Jamie, perhaps?
Well, I'm only going to take this one because obviously Simon's going to mention it, but also I'm for my sins a lawyer, and I have reviewed the documentation. I think we did say in a previous update, it's difficult to say too much because to the extent there is any opportunity for redress via there, I don't want to prejudice our position by going and blurting stuff out. What I can say for the paperwork that I've looked at and that we've had reviewed, there is a warranty, but it relates to the stitching of the pitch, which is the very top layer of the pitch. I mean, the stitching extends down below into the root zone, but it's the top bit essentially. That's the bit that is warranted. That is not the bit that is causing the pitch problems. As Simon said earlier, the pitch problems are that you get to a certain depth below the surface of the pitch and it's not draining. It's the material that is below that level. There is a warranty, but unfortunately it's not one that is going to give us any comfort in this situation. I mean, I don't want to say too much. There's a lot I could say about that contract. I'm not going to for the reasons you just said, but it's if we could do something, we would, and if we can, we will. That's as much as
Thank you, Jamie. I think anyone who works in the profession knows that there could be a potential litigation, and we don't want to prejudice our case. But thank you very much for the question. The next one's kind of been answered by Jimmy, but one of the board might want to just answer this one. How do the manager and the board assess our progress in the first 6 to 8 months of their 3 and 5 year plans? Probably another one for you, Jamie, I think.
Well, I will, in the sense that these are sort of Ogden plans, and I'm going to speak on their behalf today. So, the 3-year plan was to get back into the league. It's a bit early to say, but I think, and I'm probably not the best qualified to talk about the football team. I think, from our perspective, we've provided a budget that we think is competitive. We've provided a budget, but not crazy. We've provided a budget that we thought would give ourselves a good chance of getting into the playoffs, which is the best way of playing your percentages in this league and getting into the League Two that way. And as it stands, we're in that position. I think Jim's done a really good job of building the foundations of a really nice squad, and we've got some of those key players on longer term contracts, so we have a bit of sustainability there. So I think, as a personal opinion, I think we're in good shape. I mean, you're somewhat in the lap of the gods, but I can't guarantee we're going to get anywhere in 3 years, but that's our aspiration, and I think that we're giving ourselves a good chance of getting there. The 5-year plan was to try and bring financial sustainability to the club without relying on football success or cup runs or promotion. I mean, the more we become aware of the finances of a club operating in the National League, especially a big club, there is a difference between clubs that have been higher up the leagues that fall down and those clubs that start at grassroots and build up, because they kind of tend to have to build themselves up in a sustainable way anyway. Whereas when you come down, you're going the opposite way, so it makes life a lot harder. You've got bigger infrastructure, you've got bigger costs, you've got bigger expectations. It makes it much harder. When you hit the National League, your attendances fall off. You're going to places like Kent to play games, and you've got reverse attendances of virtually zero. You've also got the problem that you don't get any money down from the top of the pyramid. So 500 grand that we got last year as our second parachute payment disappears this year. So this is a long-winded way of saying that is going to be a massive challenge. We're looking, that's assuming we stay in the National League and we don't have massive cup runs. Can we get to financial sustainability? Can we get the annual gap to zero? We could if we got 5,000 people in the stadium, but that's not realistic either. So I think there are definitely ways that we can reduce that gap, and that's what we're spending a lot of time thinking about. For example, redeveloping the main stand here is an option that we're looking at very closely. We've had a lot of work done on it. We're constrained because of the geography of Scotland and the age of the infrastructure, but there's definitely work we can do. Capital expenditure we'd have to put in that would drive revenues. The question is, how much can we close that gap? I don't want to sit here and mislead you. I think it's a tough challenge, but we're fully committed to doing the best we can to get there.
Wonderful, thank you, Jamie. The next question, in the absence of Jimmy, I'm going to ask George to answer this next question. It says, I have read the book X Genius, which gives great insight into how both Brentford and Brighton use data analysts to overperform. As football fans, we never tend to hear about this interesting and intriguing aspect of football. So can someone on the panel provide a bit of insight into how important statistics and data is to running a successful football club, and how the staff use the data to prepare, analyse matches and guide transfer strategy. I think that could be for you, George.
I think we could be here all night on that one. There's about 10
Don't shoot the messenger, George, I'm just reading out the question.
Yeah, brilliant question from whoever submitted that, so thank you very much for that one. We've talked a little bit around this area before, so it's an area that when we kind of unpacked our relegation out of the Football League, that Simon, myself and others felt that we were miles and miles behind on. So it is an area we've tried to do quite a lot of work in, and a lot of the work has been involving external people and bringing some level of objectivity from a data point of view into the football club. The one that I've mentioned previously to everyone in the room and via various channels is a company called Market Insights, MRKT. We've just renewed our relationship with those guys for a period of 3 more seasons. They really do help us with a lot on the data side of things, both from a recruitment point of view and more broadly from kind of a progress point of view. I'll give you a good example. Liam Hogan, who was brought up earlier by the gentleman at the back. Liam essentially was identified when we were on the search for an aerially dominant central centre back. So rather than having kind of the Ebanks Landell replacement ready to go, because we just signed him to a 2-year contract and it's quite a niche position being as the central centre half, and we had Kyle Ferguson in the building, so there was some continuity there. We hadn't done tons and tons of work on the next one if one of them was to go down. We didn't feel Ethan was a player who would necessarily get sold, or that we would move on. So yeah, the data really led us to Liam. It wasn't a player who we'd kind of observed loads and loads in the past, and we kind of gone into the 1980s little black book that we've kept of players that we've seen play. But we ran the data on him, and he was one of the, in terms of available players within budget and within geography and some of the other areas that were important to us. All of his metrics involving aerial dominance and those types of things matched up quite well to Ethan Ebanks Landell. We've also at various stages this season worked with a company called StatsBomb. Those of you who kind of follow these types of accounts on social media will see they're really good at creating kind of player radars. So if you overlay Liam and Ethan from a player radar point of view, the aerial dominance is almost kind of spot on. So we do use it quite a bit. I would say we're probably up there with the most prevalent users of data within the National League. The comparison to Brentford and Brighton is a good one, but we are kind of a million miles away from that kind of level in terms of they've got huge teams, and many of you will know both Matt Benham, who's the owner of Brentford, and Tony Bloom, who's the owner of Brighton, are both from a gambling background, so both have their own companies who trawl, who are essentially statistical based companies, and they can leverage resource within those areas into their football clubs as well. In terms of just kind of metrics in general, we're trying to get to a point, just for the benefit of everyone on the panel, we've talked about this loads, whereby we just get a really brief dashboard of 2, 3, 4, 5 metrics that lead us to believe that we're on the right path. The scoreboard can lie, the league table can lie. So in terms of the specifics of what the question was asked, one of the metrics we use, and it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's non-penalty XG difference. So if you strip penalties, which we view as kind of statistical anomalies, and those of you who've been to a lot of the games this season, Forest Green away sticks into the mind, Eastleigh away sticks into the mind. We haven't had a single penalty until just last week, so it's important that we strip those out of the data, because they can be quite noisy. You can dominate a game and lose to a penalty. So it essentially generates, on average, if we were to simulate billions and billions of games based on the events that occurred, how likely we would be to score from certain situations and how likely we would be to concede from certain situations. And by that metric, as do most of them that we look at, we rank between 4th and 7th in the league, which again gives us some confidence that the underlying numbers of the team should hopefully, as long as there's not a big drop-off, drag us into that playoff picture by the end of the season. So I hope that's a brief explanation. Probably could go on all night on that, but
a great answer, George. Yes, I think it's important to see how we use the data and statistics in modern football. Right, the next question I'm going to bat over to our co-chairman Simon Gage, and this is in relation to the National Cup. From the board's perspective, do the board consider our participation in this competition a success? Has it given the club any financial benefit, given the horrendously low attendances and just a low £2 admission fee? And if the club are in a position to participate next season, would the same decision be made? Whilst this questioner would usually support any participation in a cup competition, which gives a chance to promote our youth, this gentleman says we cannot support being robbed of a potential FA Cup replay and dumped, in his words, a BTEC Johnston Paint Trophy instead. Good luck, Simon.
So there's two parts to that question, really. The first part's an economic one on that. So we're in our last year of parachute payments now from the EFL, and then all EFL money is coming to the football club stop. So that's it. The amount of money you get from the National League is pittance, which is why it's really hard in this league to make the books balance. So economically, they're the problems that you have. So where do you increase income from? Now, for whatever reason went on nationally, the Premier League want and very keen for this competition, and there's no money coming from the EFL, so you look at the Premier League, and the bare economics of it are that there's £1 million that the Premier League are paying this year to the National League to take part in this competition. So you're then left with a choice: do you want a share of that, or just want to sit on the sidelines and watch everyone else take the share of it? So from a financial point of view, it's not crowd dependent, this competition at all. Outside of the FA Cup competition, it's the most lucrative competition that we play in at the moment. So we win a game in that, and it more than makes up financially for taking part. Will we play it in the future? There's good parts to it and there's bad parts. We see great opportunities in the National League Cup. There's also problems with it. For example, when you get a fixture pile-up like we've got now, in a lot of ways the last thing we want to do is win the last match and qualify for the next round to fit a load more matches in. So that's not a good situation to be in a competition. I know, speaking to other clubs, they feel a bit like that as well. So I think there's opportunities for this competition. It's very lucrative, so we have that as a starting point. We'd like to see it moved a lot earlier in the season, so we can perhaps incorporate 1 or 2 pre-season friendlies as part of the competition, or towards the end of the pre-season friendlies, so that competition starts really early on, where there's not big fixture pile-ups and the pitches are good, and it's a better time of year to be starting to play in this competition. The other thing that we're really keen and where we think there's a real big opportunity, and us along with Altrincham are the 2 clubs that our cost tried this out, was free admission to the competition. And we think, especially when we're talking about Project 5000 and things like that, it gives a real opportunity to get a different type of crowd in and open the club up to people that wouldn't normally come maybe on a Saturday and a Tuesday when the price is more expensive. So one of the things we're suggesting to the National League moving forward is for the Premier League clubs just to pay a little bit more money to us to cover stewarding costs and things on match days, so that we can offer free entry to all these matches and then really use it as an opportunity to try and grow our fan base, get a younger crowd in and people that wouldn't normally come to the game into the National League. So there's pluses and minuses to it, but it shouldn't be judged on crowds is probably what I'd answer to that question.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for your question, the gentleman or lady that submitted that. The next one, Jamie, I think you've probably covered most of this, but I'll ask the question The gentleman says, I like the ambition of the board with the Project 5000 that was mentioned in the Christmas statements. However, we struggle to get an average of just over 3,500 when we're in the top half of League One. Do the board consider this a realistic target whilst playing in the conference, and what strategies does the board have to meet this goal?
Yeah, I think I kind of covered that. I mean, it's definitely ambitious, but you may as well be ambitious. I think, as I say, it will require a lot of work, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen because of one initiative. It's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen. You can't say it definitely will happen, but I think we should all try and get there because that the sustainability of the club will depend on making sure that there's generations coming to games before and generations of all different sorts of demographics. So yeah, it's ambitious. If it's realistic, I don't know, but we may as well.
Okay, thank you very much to whoever submitted that. Right, final question that's submitted by the fans. This is relating to Ian Henderson, our all-time record goal scorer. He's just had a momentous birthday. Did the panel have any idea when details of Hendo's testimony will be published? I won't want to miss the occasion to celebrate this legend, and I think the date, even if no other details, should be released as soon as possible to avoid fans arranging plans for earlier in the summer months that could clash.
Yeah, I'll take it. So firstly, we had a dinner here which was great. It's been brilliant. The event next week is now sold out, which is really good. I think an opportunity, particularly to spend some time at the price point, etc., that will generate some revenue, but also a great opportunity to spend some time. We have a golf day planned, currently scheduled for the back end of April. So again, we're just working through the plans with Ian, particularly on that event, and then the on-pitch event will be in May. We are looking at the schedule towards the back end of May, and obviously we've talked about the pitch a lot, and getting games on, playoffs, and potentially other things as well. So we don't have a date as we sit here now. We will try and get that out as soon as possible, but we're aware of kind of that May window where we can have an on-pitch event with Ian particularly, and we'll try and get that out as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Andy. And for anyone who's coming the evening, I think a week on Saturday, the event's sold out, hasn't it already, I think? About a 175 capacity for the next event. An evening with Hendo and friends. Right, we're now at the time of the proceedings where we're going to invite some questions from the floor. Rather than just sweep the room as I've done in the past, I'm just going to quite simply ask you to put your hand up. I'll come to you, you submit your question, and someone on the panel will be elected to answer your question. So if you have a question, just raise your arm in the air and I'll come over to you. First person with a question. If not, we can all go on. We're at the second half of Manchester United. And we've got a question, seriously. Right, here we go. This chap, if you just introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name's Richard. I think it might be for George, this, but do you know if the EFL are going to review the usage of 4G pitches in the Football League anytime soon? And if they did, would we consider installing a 4G pitch?
Really good question. You'll have seen last season being the first time we ended up playing on some 3G services in league fixtures via, testing me now, Bromley, Dorking and Oxford City it would have been. We've only got Tamworth in the league this season with 3G pitches. I think there's all sorts of research constantly ongoing. There's some, from a personal point of view, some quite misleading research that's out there on injuries. There's a perception, particularly amongst senior players, that they're more likely to get particularly knee, ankle, hip type injuries on 3G pitches, but all of that kind of leads into the noise from an EFL point of view. To the best of our knowledge, and Simon and I go to kind of league meetings all the time, we're at one this afternoon, in fact, at Oldham with the National League, there isn't any plans, to the best of our knowledge, certainly nothing's been communicated to us that the EFL are considering moving the goalposts on that. I think what we would like to see in the medium term, and this is not necessarily for us, this is just a whole kind of football ecosystem point, that if a club from the National League, and it's obviously happened with Harrogate and others in the past, Bromley just recently, are promoted up, there should really be at least a grace period rather than they have the summer to rip the pitch out. And you could almost use that as a test case, and it kind of builds some evidence towards potential inclusion. But from a personal point of view, when you can use pitches of that nature in everything from World Cup qualifiers to Champions League games to everything else. I think it's quite difficult to make a case to not include them at tier 4 in England. But yeah, to answer your question, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't a point on EFL. Simon, I don't know if you just wanted to chip in there.
I think the other point on there is it's part of the fan-led review rather than the EFL. I don't think the EFL are interested in allowing 3G pitches in, but the fan-led review, one of the recommendations was, I think, to have a 3-year grace period, just because of the financial hit that it makes teams by digging their pitch up, and the whole revenue of the football club generally revolves around those 3G pitches. Would we have one here if all the rules change and everything? Probably me sat here without Jim sat next to me, I'd say it would make financial sense to do that, but I don't think Jim would be so keen if he was sat next to us, so luckily it's not a debate we've got to have at the moment.
Right, thank you, Simon, and thank you, George. Anyone else in the room that has a question for the panel this evening, this chap here? I'll just make my way down. Just introduce yourself to the panel, sir, and ask your question.
My name's Derek, and I'd like to know if the club are in receipt of any money from the transfer of Ollie Rathbone from Rotherham to Wrexham. I believe the Wrexham fee was over £500,000. And also, is the club in receipt of any money for Nevitt's performances for Peterborough?
George is going to take that. Ollie Rathbone and George Nevitt.
Yeah, thanks for the question. As with many of these deals, the sell-ons are always over and above the fee received, the cumulative fee received. So with Ollie, to take your first question, the simple answer is that when all taken into account, and obviously there's some figures in the media, they're often wrong, and they are wrong in this case. But when all taken into account, the fee Wrexham paid didn't eclipse the fee that Rotherham paid us, so we didn't receive anything from Ollie. In relation, so we would have got a percentage of the surplus. That's how the sell-ons tend to work. But yeah, it didn't eclipse what we received cumulatively from Rotherham. In relation to George, George has got all sorts of contingent fees, as you can imagine, but none of those have been triggered yet, but they are on the way to being triggered.
Thank you, George. And let's have a question this evening, back down this end of the room. Once again, just introduce yourself again, if you could.
Hi, it's Steve again. Two actually, one quick one. First of all, what's the timeline for establishing the Golden Share? And secondly, a question for Simon Gage. On a very practical basis, from your point of view, how is the co-chairmanship of the club working out? How does that actually work with your other co-chairman, Cameron Ogden?
Hi there. I'll just respond on the Golden Share. I appreciate that we talked about it, or I talked about it when I was last here, which was a long time ago, and it's not in place yet. So as soon as possible is what I can say. I can actually. I'm not. There's no reason for me not to be entirely open with you. The Golden Share is there. There's no question about it. And by the way, unless and until we put we formalise it in the Articles of Association of the club, there is no question that anything is happening with this ground or anything. So you have to take my word for that. But that's the truth. The nuance is that. When you actually come to write down what the Golden Share is, there are intricacies, because despite the fact that we want to say, we the Ogdens, the shares we bought, we will never sell this ground or do anything with this ground without the consent of the Dale Trust, because that's what the Golden Share should say. But you don't want to then put yourself in a situation where if there was a genuinely good reason in the interests of the entire club for whatever, that the club may want to move next door or to another ground, or that you then want to make the club a hostage of fortune. So there are some legal niceties to some of the wording that and other clubs have done it before, Brentford being one actually. So we're just working through some of that and then we'll talk to the Dale Trust about it. But it's going to happen, and it will happen. I mean, I don't want to say something to get being over there. It will happen within the next few months, would be my guess, but I'll keep you posted.
Over to you, Simon, for the second part of the question.
Yeah, well, it's working out very well. Firstly, because Cameron and his family have put the investment into the football club, which stabilises everything. It means that from a board level, we're able to bring people that offer a lot of different skills onto the board, such as Jamie sat to me right, Adam, who's taken over the finance side of things. And what that means ultimately that we're working towards is that the board becomes more like a traditional board rather than having to get stuck in and involved in all different aspects of the football club on a day-to-day basis. We're moving away from that scenario now, and we're recruiting people that there's an executive management team now at the football club that run everything on a day-to-day basis. On the co-chairman bit, the names to a certain degree because the whole board chips in on everything, but it helps me being able to be here this evening when Cameron's climbing up Kilimanjaro, and he's based in London and I'm here and available most days to talk to the guys. But it will keep evolving, the relationships and what people do within the football club. But I think the whole investment from the Ogden family and the strengthening of the board has been a breath of fresh air for the football club. It's given us the stability that we need, and it's given us the optimism to build a very bright future here. I think it's important that we all work towards that together now with the various things that have been suggested here this evening.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Steve, for the question. Anyone else would like a question? Just raise a couple over here. I'll just take this chap first. He's already had a question this evening. If you just remind me who you are and fire away your question.
Hi, Tony Kaminskas again. It's a question for Simon. Excuse me. You spoke earlier on about the pitch. You're talking about machines, getting pitch covers, obviously digging the pitch up. Sounds to me like it's quite a big outlay. I couldn't even guess how much it's going to cost. And it's also been mentioned that we're in around the playoff area at the minute. We've got games in hand. Win a couple of those games, we're right back in the mix. If we win them all, we're not far off the top of the league. Now, this could have happened already, but I'm sure there's going to be a point where Jimmy McNulty says to you, right, I want this player, I want this, let's go for it. Are you going to be in a position to say, here's a wad, Jim, go and get your man? Or is it going to be a case of, sorry mate, the pot's empty, we've spent a lot of money on the pitch. Have you any guarantees about money in the pot?
So we start from the pitch side of things. Yes, it's expensive to repair the pitch, and it's important to stress as well the repairs that have been done at the minute are very temporary repairs. They do not solve the underlying problem of the pitch, in that there's a load of stuff underneath the surface that doesn't let water through it. That's a longer term issue that we've got to deal with. So on the pitch front, I wouldn't say we're confident that we've solved the issues in the short term. We're hoping we've been able to solve the issues in the short term and be able to get through this season. Work's now starting on the pitch front to look at longer term solutions, so we don't end up in the same situation next year. On the playing front, Jim's always coming to us asking for various players, so it kind of, and I'll explain it from my point of view, and then it's probably important for Jamie just to give the Ogden's representative their point of view on it. But we start off the season with a playing budget that we think is competitive, and we'll be able to get in or around the playoffs, if you like, and that budget was spent. There's then things that happen throughout the season, the pitch being one of them, Ivan Landor getting injured being another one of them, and Jim at various points may come and say and put an argument together that there's a need for players to support the need at that particular time, and I can say categorically that he's been tremendously supported by the ownership group on that. So if Jim does come and say there's a need for something, then on a case-by-case basis it's considered, and we'll do what we can to get in those playoffs and support Jim in every way we can.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Sean, for the question. There was another chap here, I think, who had a question. This gentleman here. Thank you. Thank you.
I may be talking out of my hat on this one, but I get very little frustrated when I'm watching the television, and we're getting reports on the television from ITV, TNT, Sky, but when it comes to the BBC, they don't want us. There's never, ever, unless I'm going daft, there's never anything on the TV at the sports time of the news or a general cross-board section where we're actually mentioned. Is there any reason for it? Have we fell out with them? Have they fell out with us?
Just before we answer the question, he definitely said talking out of his hat. Just been careful. I think Simon's going to feel this question.
No, I mean, we have relationships with the BBC, but mainly through BBC Radio Manchester, and they have a lot of other priorities, it seems, in this area. It's probably, I mean, there's no falling out with the BBC, that's just how they choose to go, but yeah, we try and, through our media team and various places, try and build relationships with all areas of the media, and you have more success in some areas than others.
Right, just to finish it off on that hasn't answered my question really, but I'm sorry. We're talking tonight about publicity, we've talked about how we can raise money and get it in, and we've had a very good evening in my opinion, but there's other ways as well to try and raise money. I mean, we don't have anywhere, and I'll be careful I say this, we don't seem to have anywhere regarding publicity around the town in general, in any shape or form. Once upon a time, we used to have a little box in those days where somebody was there from Thursday till Saturday dinner time selling either programmes or whatever and making money and selling the shirts and stuff. You know, half a lot of people don't know there's football ground up here. I'm being honest. I really am. I mean, I've been watching this club for over 60 years. And I'm an old bugger to say that. But I enjoy coming. And my two lads enjoyed coming when they were coming through. And I get worried and upset when I see that we seem to be losing out on publicity in general. And I was in that game anyway, but that's immaterial. And it does upset me. And I'm sure there must be a way of getting into this again. Better. Thank you very much.
One for you, think, Andy.
I'll
Thank
take
you.
it, yeah. You know, a key part of my role, I've been in just over 6 now, is to be, for a better word, a figurehead or a public face for the club, you know, a match day, but also in the relationships that we need to have around the town. So, you know, we recently hosted an RDA meeting here actually. It was there happened to be their low carbon group, so it was about kind of sustainability. But especially with the business community and all of the different groups in Rochdale is a key part of my role to be more of that public face. You know, and we can do better, and we need to do a lot more because absolutely there are a number of groups, people throughout the town of Rochdale that don't seem to kind of be as involved in the football club as I'm used to. So that's a key part of my role to do that outreach in some ways. And to make sure that I think sometimes we think we put a post on social media and that might be the job done, but that is only a small percentage of people that kind of could be interested in Rochdale Football Club. So yeah, it's probably my role fundamentally in the group that I work with, commercial team, media, etc., to make sure that we are generating as much publicity and as much kind of engagement with all the opportunities around Rochdale and the Greater Manchester region as well as we can. So it probably sits with me in the nicest way.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thanks for such a great question. This chap here has a question for the panel.
It's Colin Wilson. In the past, one of the benefits of having a season ticket was that you got a priority window for cup games and for any other games. Away games, it might be more difficult as a result of the way National League clubs operate tickets. But for example, for the Oldham game that's coming up away, and for any playoff game and for any trophy game that might, for example, lead to Wembley, I would hope, because season ticket holders like to sit with the people that are around them, and I've heard that the software or whatever, there might be different reasoning behind that, but really you ask for money at the start of the season from season ticket holders to put a budget together, and we do that, and then one of the benefits that we always had was that priority window. But correct me if I'm wrong, for the Bromley game and the Stockton game, that wasn't the case for whatever reasons. I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm just asking why not and what is going to be put in place to make sure that does happen if possible, please.
Yeah, so fundamentally I'll answer the question around the principle. Absolutely we need to say thank you and reward season ticket holders as much as possible for their loyalty in every possible way. A key way is around the priority window. So the answer would be yes, at every possible opportunity to allow season card holders either to have their seat and or have a time advantage, whatever the window that might be, of days or a week, to buy in advance of general sale is the principle that we try and operate on. More recently there was, I can't remember which game, it might have been the Bromley game. Actually it was a bit of an oversight, but I think we were been behind with some of our ticketing system in putting the game live on sale, and even if that had been a short window, maybe a day or two, we should have put a priority window, which we didn't do. And I know the Supporters Trust fed back to us and said that was an oversight of ours. But the principle around priority windows for all future games, and myself and the ticket office manager spoke about it, will be a principle we try and enforce. And if there are other ways we can also add benefits or thank you to season card holders to add value to that relationship, it's very much something we want to do.
Thank you very much, Andy. This chap here has a question. You just find your question.
Coming back to the pitch and what's been said previously tonight, 3 weeks ago the club released a statement saying that purchasing a full set of rain covers would not materially improve the situation. Now tonight we're saying we're going to do that. So what's changed and why will these now help the situation?
I'm only just going to take that one because I was involved in that statement. I think, and it's a good question because you're right. The first one and the second one look inconsistent because we said covers weren't going to help, and now we're getting covers. It was more a question of at the point in time we were then, which was then when our centre circle, as Simon was alluding to earlier, was a mush, and there was the entire pitch in fact was waterlogged. Covers at that point were not going to help us because there was discussion among various groups about why do we get a set of covers, and these are expensive. This is like 30 grand for the ones we're going to get on Monday, or that region. The cost of the centre circle, the work we did in the centre circle was more in the region of £100,000. So, but at the time it was, and this is money that you can't. It's not money that the club really has. I mean, it does have it, but it's not. For all the reasons we talked about, it doesn't really have it. So it's like, well, every decision is a difficult decision. And at the point I was trying to make in that comments was that at that point in time, covers wasn't going to help us because the water was not getting through. It was already in the pitch. Now what we have is with the work we've done, we have a marginal pitch. By which I mean, it's 50-50 whether it's going to be okay, as we've seen. And it's a really difficult position to be in because for the refs who come and do a pitch inspection, for us, trying to gauge whether we should give people advance warning, it's 50-50. It's almost easier if it's completely gone, because then you can say we're definitely not going to play. As now we're in a sort of, what do we do? When we're in a marginal situation, and now that we've done the work in the centre, the covers will marginally help. So we've bought them. So we'll put them down because clearly, and it's obvious really, but yeah, if you could stop the water getting on there in the first place, then there's going to be less water on the pitch. The problem we had was that the water was already in the pitch. So it's kind of had to go in that order. It made sense to do the work first. See, if that had worked amazingly well, and we got the dry jetting done, we may not have needed the covers, but we haven't got the dry jetting done because it was still wet, and so belt and braces were getting the covers. That's the best I can do.
Thank you, Jamie. Very thorough answer. Matt, back down the end of the room here for this next question. Matthew Devine has got a question for the panel. There you go, mate.
Hi guys, it's Matt. I think the Club Advisory Board is a big step forward and really positive news, and thank you for sharing that tonight. My concern is the day-to-day communication between the club and the fans, and I noted that said every 2 months a meeting and then published afterwards, and I think what was published recently about the pitch was really detailed and I'd rather know more than less. But day to day, I think there's a lack of communication and coherence between the club and the fan base, and quite often it seems to be reactive. A lot of things are put on a message board, Facebook, whatever, and then the club feels the need to put a statement out. Whereas I feel if the communication was proactive and the fan base was more in the know and more engaged on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, we wouldn't need that reactive statement or whatever. And I just wonder if you guys would agree, and possibly what lessons have been learned with regards to communication this season.
Thank you, Matt. Who wants to take that one on?
I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. That's a brilliant question, and it's a very valid one. As I said earlier, the whole theme of better communication from the club, that's not going to be solved by the advisory board on its own, but it's a theme that I'm trying to get into the culture of the club across the board. So, I mean, from a recent board meeting, one thing we said was that what we're going to try and do is, if there is an action the club is going to take that will impact the fans in some way or another, positively or negatively. If it impacts the fans, let's say why we're doing it, when we do it. So if, for example, I'm going to give a bad example, there's just one that came up. If we shut the Sandy Lane for a game, for example, there's probably a good reason, commercial reason why that's been done. But if we don't say why we've done it, it's not obvious why it's been done. And the assumption might be that someone's incompetent or someone's trying to annoy someone. But there is a good reason, probably. You may disagree with it, but there will be a rationale for why. So why don't we just say why we've done it? It's kind of my... and then that gets rid of all the confusion or room for speculation about why and it removes the us and them to some of the issues that I can see cropping up every now and again. So you have to... The proof will be in whether we deliver that or not, but I think that is what we are trying to get top to bottom throughout the club, is that idea that there's nothing to hide. Why don't we just communicate quicker and better? And we won't always get it right. And in a way, the point of the advisory board is that, or way in that, I mean, the Dale Trust already do this, we get feedback all the time, is to get as much feedback as we can. So when we have got it wrong, and someone says, hold on, you haven't put a priority window for the Bromley game, we can more quickly react when we do get it wrong, but hopefully be better at telling you stuff in advance and when we do.
Well, thank you, Jamie, for such a thorough answer and a great question from Matt. I'm just conscious that we're getting towards the end of the evening here. Any more questions from the floor? I'll take this chap here before we go over to Tom.
Mike Mitchell, regarding the postponement against Boston, why, if the pitch was dodgy, why did they not have an earlier inspection? And then, because we've had to pay Boston's expenses, surely you could have had a pitch inspection earlier and it'd saved them having to come at all.
Thank you. George Dells will answer that question for you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a point that's been raised by a few people, so it's a good question to ask. Most people in the room will have seen the statement that went out, and I'm kind of just going to regurgitate that a little bit. That our view at various stages throughout the afternoon was that if a referee had have been engaged to come and do a pitch inspection, let's say midday, 1 o'clock, they happened to be leaving at 2:30. They couldn't have made a decision at that stage. The forecast was quite windy here. The skies were clear, and we didn't think it was significantly worse than the pitch that was played on against Yeovil a few days earlier. So, without going into massive detail, there were players that were surprised that the game wasn't ruled on, and there were staff members from both sides that thought it was borderline touch and go. And just alluding to Jamie's point there, it is, at the minute, we're in kind of really 50-50 no-win situations with stuff like that. So the point's an extremely valid one. Would we do things differently and invite someone in to look at it? Maybe, but we do still think that the result would have ended up being the same, and that we'd have had a later pitch inspection in this specific case later on. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Simon.
Yeah, if I'll just sort of add to that, because I've been around a few of these now, I've got experience with them this season of these pitch inspections. It's always fairly clear cut. If it's raining when the referee goes out there, they kind of think, well, it's not going to get any drier, this is as good as it's going to get, and it's easy to make an early decision at that point. The problem on Tuesday, and sort of explain about the communication things that weren't great on that particular day and review that and take it forward. But if the referee, he would not have called the game off at 12 o'clock, he wouldn't have called it off at 2:30, it would have kept going right until the last possible minute, because it was dry and fairly windy all day, so it was drying conditions, and the pitch didn't have any standing water on it. It wasn't obviously a game that's going to be off like several of the previous ones. And at the end of the day, it's a referee makes a decision, it's not the football club that makes a decision. So it's a really difficult set of circumstances on Tuesday, so I do have sympathy with everyone that was involved with it, but equally have a lot of sympathy with everyone that turned up at the ground, and including ourselves that are in a meeting and we thought the game was going to be on and then told that it isn't very last minute. It's not how we want to do things, and we had a similar thing happen to us when we went down to Colchester a couple of seasons ago, so we've been on the wrong end of it as well, and it's something that we don't want to happen on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Thank you, George. I've got a question here from Tom.
So one more on the advisory board and one more on the sort of data side of things. On the advisory board side of things for Murray, obviously when you were in most of your tenure on the board as the trust representative, we were the majority shareholder, we were trying to keep the club going. Neither of those two things are the case anymore. How do you see your role on the board now with regards to representing the fans and the trust members? And Jamie, from the Ogden side of things, how do you see the role of having a trust representative on the board?
Over to you, Murray.
Well, as far as me representing the trust on the board, I mean, that finishes at the end of the season for me, because I've done the 4 years that is actually part of the conditions of the trust being represented. So we have to review that as a trust as far as who, if anyone, will follow on. And it's something that's under discussion at the moment with the trust as to who would want to take over, or whether it would be the advisory board situation. I don't see the two of them being in conflict, but it's something we actually have to review as to whether the trust, through its members, would still want to be represented on the main club board, as well as the advisory board taking place. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Hopefully, Tom's okay? Summed up? Yeah, that's fair, thank you. I think it's, Simon, you're going to say some words, or Jamie? Jamie, thank you.
I think I'm certainly not going to. I mean, we're not in. You know, it's not up for us to tell the trust what they should do. If the trust wants to maintain a director on the main board, the Ogdens are not going to tell them not to. I think the only thing I would say is that, as Simon said earlier, what we are trying to move to is having an executive management team who are day to day running the club, and therefore the board meetings, even the board meetings we have now, I might query whether being in those meetings is actually, whether we're actually gleaning the information that the fans generally would want to hear. I'm not saying that we don't talk about anything serious in those meetings. I just think that actually at the level of information where we want really productive, useful dialogue between fans and the club, that the advisory board might become a more effective forum for that happening. If we do both, I'm fine with that. But it may be, and it's entirely up to the Dale Trust, where they see the bigger benefit. We won't know until we get the advisory board up and running and see how it goes. But it's not for me to say. But up to the trust. But I'm happy to have both, or one or the other, or one. So.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you to Simon. Just conscious of the time, to use a football analogy, we're going to go into added time soon. So just time for one or two more questions. This chap has a question here for the panel.
Hi, John. Question for George, I guess. Does the club have player insurance? I'm thinking in particular of Ethan Ebanks-Landell, who's out for the season, not kicked a ball, but somebody still has to pay his wages.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in the EFL and the Premier League, in fact, so across 92 clubs, there's a mandatory policy through a company called Health Partners that is essentially a collective bargaining agreement that clubs have to contribute into, and medical costs are kind of procured and at discount rates and covered through that. So from a medical point of view, when you drop out of the EFL, that comes away. So we have to bear the costs of surgery for Ethan, for example. You will sometimes see clubs at the level doing everything, perhaps more so National League North and South, but perhaps some of the smaller clubs at this level who will do things like crowdfunding and things like that for player medical care. We, as expensive as it is for us, we think it's really important to ensure that all of our players are looked after the best standard possible from a medical point of view. So despite the fact that we don't have kind of significant medical cover, we self-fund that. We do have to be a part of a player's personal accident insurance policy that the National League is. It's a mandatory policy that the National League mandates that all 72 clubs are part of. So we do have some coverage within that. But in terms of, if you're alluding to kind of wage protection and stuff like that, we don't have that. So we pay the full wage of the player, whether or not they're available. But it's a good question. I'm sure one that many in the room have thought about as well and are interested in. But again, alluding back to Simon's point on budget earlier, Ethan's obviously, as the captain of the team, I'm sure people can see as a senior player he'd be one of our more well paid players. So it did take some additional funding from the Ogden family to secure a replacement. And looping back to the question of is Jim and his technical staff going to be well supported? They've been brilliantly supported so far, and we expect that to continue on a case by case basis when players are presented to everyone to make decisions on as kind of the window progresses and beyond that. So hopefully that helped.
Thank you, George. Just time maybe for one more question. If anyone's got a question before we wrap things up, I'm going to go back. I'm going to make this the last question tonight, if that's okay, because we're on the minutes here. But this chap has a question. If you just direct it to the panel, please.
Yeah, Steve. It's to do with shareholders. At the last AGM, we didn't really get to discuss much in any other business, and the issue I'd like to raise is there's a lot of people in here who are minority shareholders. We've got no influence anymore, but we've been there a long time, we care about the club, but we like to get involved. The last two AGMs, well, one that to be postponed, and the one that was held on a Monday morning at 11 o'clock, the timing was very, very inconvenient. You've got 10 months to plan it. Will it be possible for the next AGM, and no doubt the EGM that's going to come up to do with the Articles of Association, going to be held at 7:30 of the evening, please?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Simon.
Yeah, yes.
Jamie, you're going to add to that?
Well, I mean, yes, I'll just say it louder. Yeah, it wasn't the intention to have it at that time of the day, and we are aware, I say we, the Ogdens are aware that it might have looked like we've taken a majority shareholding in the club. We know that our vote can get anything through, so we don't value an AGM, so we'll have it at an annoying time, and I know that that's how it looked. And apologies for that. It was actually a scheduling issue. We had to cancel one. I know you know the details. The game was moved, but still, next year it won't be at that time, or the EGM will not be. It will be at a convenient time, and I hope that for the people who were able to go, there shouldn't really be any restriction on questions that can be answered if people want to ask. I think there was some element of us knowing that there was a fan. And I know it's a shareholders are different to fans. But there was a fan forum, so there was going to be a wider opportunity for people to hear from the club. We probably didn't get it right, apologies, but next year we'll do better on that front.
Thank you once again. I think there was an additional question to say, would team coffee be provided as well? And I think Simon said there was. That's a great way to end this evening. Thank you ever so much for everyone that's attended this evening here at the Ratcliffe. Everyone who's joined us on our YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on our fans forum. Let's just say a big thank you to our panel this evening: Jamie Willoughby, Simon Gage, Andy Duff, George Dells, Ryan Bradley, Richard Knight and Murray Knight. Thank you.